Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be doing a 1-year review on the Xbox Series X, and this idea comes from one of my followers over on Twitter and someone who's actually subscribed to this channel. I really appreciate him. His name is Joel Felix, so go ahead and go over on Twitter and follow this guy because he's a really awesome dude. But with that being said, let's get right into this review. First up, I want to say that I'll be going over everything I've got here on my list, and my list includes a lot of good stuff. But there's also some bad stuff I want to be realistic about, and instead of saving the bad stuff for last, I decided I want to put the bad stuff right up front so that the video can end on a positive note. And let me be clear, there isn't much about the Xbox Series X that is bad, but there is one very big thing, and it's been bad even well before the Series X launched. And if you're a fan of Xbox, and Xbox is your preferred platform like myself, then you likely know exactly what I'm talking about. And of course, I'm talking about the Xbox Game DVR. It's something that has been really finicky for the better part of the last 3 years maybe. It's something that Xbox really needs to work on, and they are very well aware of that. I mean, I think it was just recently that Jason Ronald, who was leading development for both the Series X and Series S, was on the Iron Lords podcast talking about how they're very well aware that the game DVR is an issue for Xbox, and it has been for a while. And if you're not on Xbox and you're wondering what these issues that I'm talking about are, then just to go over some of the most major complaints I've seen and experienced myself are things like out of sync audio, colors can get washed out when recording in 4K, and sometimes you can record an entire clip and when you go back to watch it, the whole clip is just a black screen with audio. Now, this is something that hasn't happened too much to me since the first month or two of the Xbox Series X, but I know that it's something that does still occur regularly for a lot of people, and it's for that reason that this is definitely still worth acknowledging and recognizing as a problem for this platform. Now, with that negativity out of the way, we can get into all of the other Xbox goodness that the Series X has to offer. And guys, I'm not lying when I say that this thing literally has tons of amazing things that it can do. But I think the first thing I want to talk about is the features that this console has to offer. I mean, you've got things like quick resume, you've got incredibly fast load times, you've got the backwards compatibility, you've got things like FPS Boost, and there's plenty more, and I'll be going over all of it. And I think it's only fair that we start with quick resume, because it's kinda hard to talk about the Xbox Series X without mentioning quick resume. This is a feature that at this point I fully take for granted. It's something that I now expect to be there, and it's a hindrance to me when I boot up any other console and it isn't there. And if you're watching this review and trying to decide whether or not you want to go with Xbox and you don't know what quick resume is, basically it's the ability to have multiple games in a suspended state on your console. So for example, right now as I'm recording this, I've got 7 games in quick resume, and what that means is that I can be playing one game 1 minute and then decide I want to hop back into one of my last 7 games played, and it picks up exactly where I left off. No saves necessary. And there are some caveats to this. I know there are a few games that just don't work in quick resume. I know one of the bigger ones that I play on a regular basis that doesn't work in quick resume is Mass Effect Legendary Edition, but I'd say about 98% of the time it does work correctly, and it's as simple as selecting the game you want from your quick resume list and you can hop right back into the game within seconds and you're right back where you left off. And this is especially useful for someone like myself who spends a lot of time in single player games by myself, but then once my friends are online, I can just boot up a multiplayer game like Halo or Forza and play with my friends for a bit, but once I'm done with that, then I can quick resume right back into whatever game I was playing earlier. Or maybe you're like me, you have rampant ADHD and you just don't know what you want to play, so you're always going between games. Either way, Quick Resume is one of the best features that Xbox has to offer for this generation. And up next, I want to talk about what I think could possibly be the most important feature that Xbox's flagship console has on offer, and that is its backwards compatibility. And that's not to say that the other consoles don't also offer backwards compatibility. I mean, this is a feature you will find on both Xbox and PlayStation this generation. However, what makes the Xbox different and puts them above the competition, in my opinion of course, is that not only are the old games playable, but in many cases they've been enhanced, and this is something that started well before the Xbox Series X and Series S had even been announced. I mean, before we had these consoles, we had the Xbox One X, and there were a lot of Xbox One X enhanced games. We saw games going all the way back to the original Xbox running at well over quadruple their original resolution. And I think of a game like Max Payne 2, which was actually just recently added to backwards compatibility and what was stated to be their final batch of new backwards compatible games. It's a game that was released way back in October of 2003, and today I can run it on my Xbox Series X at a native 4K resolution. Hell, I just got The Witcher 2 in this year's Xbox holiday sale, and I'm playing through it right now at a full 4K resolution, and this is a game that came out over a decade ago. And I can even top that as well because I can go all the way back to Fusion Frenzy, which was a launch game for the original Xbox, and as of last month, this game is officially 20 years old, and it looks and plays better than ever before on Xbox Series X. It's really impressive to me what Xbox has done with their backwards compatibility. And this is something that actually leads right into the next part of the review, which is FPS Boost. Now, this is something that I did not talk about in my initial review of the console because it simply wasn't available to anyone at the time. But the next generation Xbox has come a long way in a year, and finally we've got our hands on FPS Boost. And as you've probably guessed by now, what FPS Boost does is it boosts your FPS. It works on a select number of backwards compatible games, and after their latest update last month, I've counted 133 games total that benefit from FPS Boost. And in this list you'll see a variation of different boosts. I know some of my favorites are the Far Cry series of games. I mean, it's not the whole series, but you can play Far Cry 3 through 5 as well as New Dawn and Far Cry Primal at 60 FPS. You also have both Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Fallout New Vegas and Oblivion that run at 60 FPS on the latest Xbox as well. Not to mention, they FPS boosted the entire Gears of War series, with the exception of Gears 5, which was already at 60 FPS and 120 FPS for the multiplayer. But for me personally, I think my favorite example of FPS Boost is Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, which is essentially just a revamped Tomb Raider 2013. Honestly, it's one of the best games ever made in my opinion, and it's always on sale for dirt cheap, so I definitely recommend picking this up if you haven't played it already, because it is fantastic at 60 FPS. But alongside FPS Boost comes a whole lot of games that have received native support, either for next gen in general or just native support for 60 FPS. And this is something that was sort of lacking at the start of the generation last year. I mean, for the most part, 30 FPS is becoming a distant memory of last-gen gaming. And that's not to say that there aren't new games offering a 30 FPS quality mode to go along with their performance modes, because there definitely still are those 30 FPS quality modes. But in my opinion, the technology has advanced so far that in most cases, I'd easily go with the 60 FPS mode. Not only because of the 60 FPS, but because there's not enough visual difference to go with a 30 FPS option when you've already got an amazing looking 60 FPS option, and in some cases an amazing looking 120 FPS option. And just to kind of circle back to just a little bit ago when I said that there are a lot of games that have native support for next gen, I wasn't kidding. There are so many games sporting that optimized for Series X and S bad. It's kind of mind-blowing when you compare how many were optimized at the beginning of this generation. I mean, of course you've got your new games that are optimized for these consoles as you'd expect, but there's a lot of games that came out well before Series X even launched that now have native support for Xbox Series X and S. Games like Control, Ghost Runner, Doom Eternal, Hellblade, Jedi Fallen Order, Metro Exodus, Plague Tale, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and that's just from the list of games that I currently have installed. So there's definitely plenty more that I am missing on this list. And then there's the game that I'm probably most excited to see get a next-gen upgrade, and that's Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now, I'm not big into Assassin's Creed games at all, but Odyssey really is one of my favorite open world games of all time. And to see it running on a console at 60 FPS at its high resolution from the Xbox One X is just absolute perfection. And in every single game that I mentioned in this list, you are able to experience the game at a full 60 FPS, and in the case of Doom Eternal, Hellblade, and Ghost Runner, you're actually able to play in modes that prioritize 120 FPS, which just feels amazing to play, even in a slow-paced game like Hellblade. And speaking of games, I think that this once again leads us right into the next part of the review, which actually is games. And I think this is a pretty funny one, honestly, because if you asked me or any other Xbox fan what they thought about the offering of games available at launch for the Series X and S, I'm sure they would have told you that it was pretty bare bones in terms of an offering. But we're kind of in the exact opposite situation right now. I mean, I can't really speak for everyone, obviously, but I've got more games to play than I ever have before. Between the new games like Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5, Far Cry 6, Guardians of the Galaxy, mixed with the ever-growing list of games from my backlog, many of which, like I said, have been upgraded to take advantage of the new hardware, I'm playing more games than I ever played in my life. And that's something that's pretty hilarious to me also, considering the fact that I feel like I'm barely even spending any real money on gaming lately. And this kind of leads us into Xbox Game Pass. And by now, I'm sure everyone and their mother has heard of Xbox Game Pass. And if you haven't heard of it, what it basically is just an extensive library of games that for one monthly fee you have access to. So I'm not going to go too in depth on Game Pass and everything it has to offer, but long story short, I think it's definitely worth having if you've got an Xbox. But the one thing I do want to talk about that pertains to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is cloud gaming. Now, if you're someone who's looking into the Xbox Series X, then odds are good you probably aren't too interested in cloud gaming, and honestly, I'm the same way. I really don't care much to play games on a mobile device, but there is one really useful thing you can do with cloud gaming on Xbox, and that's the fact that you can try any game in Game Pass, with a few exceptions, via the cloud to see if you like it before installing it to the system. And this is something that I've done numerous times since they've added it as a feature. I actually just recently started a second playthrough of Firewatch via the cloud on my Series X, and I feel like that's a perfect game to stream over the cloud because it's not very action oriented. It's just a good single player story game. And I think those are exactly the kind of games that cloud gaming is excellent for on Series X. So all in all, the Xbox Series X is an absolute beast of a console. It's got all the speed, performance, and crazy graphics that you could want in a next-gen system, and it's exactly what Xbox needed to break back into the mainstream. I mean, really, they never really left the mainstream, they just sort of had a bad generation with the Xbox One. But the Series X is truly a return to form for the Xbox platform, and I have no doubt that when this generation is done, it will be looked at as Xbox's best console of all time. And if you folks are in the market for a next-gen console and you want something to take full advantage of that nice new 4K TV you got, you want the 120 FPS, you want the 4K with insane visuals, you want Dolby Vision and all that other awesome stuff, then I definitely recommend that if you can find one of these in stock, go ahead and treat yourself and pick one up because it's definitely worth that $500 price tag. But what do you guys think? I know a lot of you watching this might have already had your Series X console for a full year as well, so let me know what your experiences have been like with the console. What do you like and what do you not like? Leave a comment below and let me know what you're thinking. And if you manage to get your hands on one of these for Christmas, leave a comment and tell me about it. Tell me what games you're most looking forward to playing. Be sure to leave a like if you like the video, and please remember to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell if you're enjoying my content and want to stay up to date on all my latest videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.